Hi, this is iXversus, a show where I take a look at some Gunplas and talk about Gundam lore. This time, I'm going to address a little tidbit that I mentioned when I talk about Tsugai's Gelgoog, GQ, saying that by capturing RX-78-2, Zeon get a fast track on the development of Geloog. You may be wondering, why would I say that? I was going to address this issue after I did a video about the original Universal Centuries Geloog, about its beginning and where it goes and how it kinda stuck in the lore. But since we got the GQuuuuuX Geloog, I decided to start from here. Now, Geloog is called Geloog because it is a variation or further development of Gogg, this guy. You can see how they have a similar chest, abdomen, and hip construction. Shoulder pads is pretty similar too. The Gogg is the only model of mobile suits that Zeon had at the time to have a large enough generator to power its own beam weapon, the Mega Beam Cannon and its belly. So they use it as the basis to design Geloog. But when I said the Geloog in GQuuuuuX being sped up, I'm not actually talking about Geloog, since the Geloog in GQuuuuuX is nothing like the Gogg. What I'm saying is the Geloog in GQuuuuuX is the next generation mobile suit that Zeon wanted to develop to replace the Zaku that have quite a fumble. I have older videos on that, but I probably do a new version when I got those Gunpla done. But that will be a while. Anyways, Geloog is Zeon's ideal next step in their general purpose mobile suit, capable of operating in space and on Earth with relatively minimal adjustment needed, unlike the Zaku 2 F-type, which suffer quite a bit of climate. The hostile, not really hostile, but the various climate on Earth is very different from the moon dust on asteroids and moons, so that gave Zaku 2 F-type a lot of trouble. So it took a while for Zeon to fix that. And the next solution is the Groove and Dome, but both of them was defeated by Gundam, which actually aligns with what Zeon wanted for the Zaku's replacement, a mobile suit with portable beam weapon on board. That's why they decided to copy Gundam. Now, I don't have the GQuuuuuX Red Gundam, so I'm going to use this Beyond Gold Blow that is close enough to demonstrate the point. Simply put, Zeon engineers just never or didn't have the relevant technology developed to enable Gundam to be so slim for their mobile suits with so many beam weapons. So the next best thing they can do is copy all the characteristics that you can find on Gundam. So a beam rifle, a beam blade. In this case, the Zeon have trouble creating a single directional beam saber hilt. That's why the beam naginata have to have two blades, because they have difficulty creating a beam sword that goes a single direction. They quickly learned that after they start producing the beam naginata, but that's kind of late. And then a shield to cover most of the mobile suits. That's why you can see the Gelgoog shield is much larger, but in fact it covers similar areas of the mobile suits. And so, yeah, instead of trying to come up with a counter to Gundam, Zeon kinda just copied the functionality of Gundam. And because Gelgoog turns out to be much bigger, and because the high tension steel or super hard steel used on Gelgoog's armor is much heavier than the lunar titanium used on Gundam, Zeon have to put on a lot more thruster around Gelgoog to have a similar mobility. It does mean Gelgoog would have a theoretically higher top speed and acceleration, but the heavier the object is, the higher the inertia, the harder it is to control, maneuver, yada yada yada. Now, I think it is very reasonable for people when they first saw the Gelgoog in GQuuuuuuX and called it a GM. One, it is a copy or mass production type of Gundam in GQuuuuuuX, and two, aside from the pale green on the original GM, which would sometimes be painted or modified to be white, it is pretty much the same, except for the style difference of Okawara and Inada Wataru, or at least the hydrogen punk look and the classic space age. Let's call it classic space age. The hydrogen punk and the classic space age look. Other than that, it is pretty similar. Both have a stubby beam gun. Both have a mountain-shaped main optic array, although they do use tri-eye on the Gelgoog GQuuuuuuX. Although this is more of a reference to Scope Dog, I think. Both have falcons, and then the antenna at the back and this general snout is more of a GM co-district type influence, like I've mentioned. Otherwise, yeah, both of them are very simplified mobile suits. Obviously, GQuuuuuuX Gelgoog lacks a shield, but it does have a backpack, much like GM. In fact, the original Gelgoog have no backpack at all. Now, this backpack style is very much a GB-01 style of backpack, but we will get to there when we get to there. In fact, if we compare the Gelgoog GQuuuuuuX with the Beyond Global, you will see how similar they are in proportion. That's why I say the aesthetic design of GQuuuuuuX isn't actually as far off from the original Universal Century as some people might think. To be honest, would I prefer the Gelgoog in GQuuuuuuX is still called GM? Yes. Would I prefer it to be more in line with the Beyond Global? Also yes. But like I have said when I do the Saga video for Sugai's Gelgoog, I think this current rendition is pretty cool. And it is close enough to the original, or rather, because Universal Century have enough wild mechanic styles over the years, it would actually work as some kind of late UC90s or UC80s hybrid GM Gelgoog thing. And finally, once again, no show at the back. Both have beam naginata. Beam rifle is replaced with beam spray gun, which I do think is more appropriate for the type of mobile suit combats that Gelgoog, or rather, is more appropriate for mobile suit or mobile suit fighting. But then, Zeong in the 01-year war was trying to compete with Gundam, not necessarily developing what makes sense. And yeah, thrusters on the legs, a lot of thrusters at the legs, and original Gelgoog have thrusters at the skirt instead of the backpack. Thematically, it works that the Gundam mass production type is being called Gelgoog in GQuuuuuuX. However, because the original Gelgoog was called Gelgoog because it was developed from the Gogg. So for the GQuuuuuuX Gelgoog to call itself, Gelgoog is kind of wrong. It should still be GM. But, probably a more Zeong type of spelling, or maybe drag along, like, GMAS, or GMASK, or GMAC, maybe. The model number for Gundam in Zeong, in GQuuuuuuX, is gMS-01A, or Alpha, whereas Gelgoog is gMS-01. It would probably make more sense if they call it Gun1 or just G1 for further confusion, but I think Gelgoog is fine. Gelgoog is, like, when you hear Gelgoog, you would associate this thing with Zeong instead of GM, which you think, oh, that is a Federation mobile suit somehow. So yeah, if we talk about technological lineage, yeah, the GQuuuuuuX Gelgoog shouldn't be called Gelgoog. If we talk about the in-universe Zeong next generation mobile suit program, it shouldn't be called Gelgoog. But for us, the audience watching the show, it makes sense to call the GQuuuuuuX Gelgoog so that we know it is the ultimate final Zaku replacement that Zeong wanted to go with. Just that they won the war without them so much, and now they are just as rare as they were in the original story. Actually, I should put Gundam down for the perfect family shots. Thanks for watching. See you next time.